In Texas, a black man is paralyzed from the chest down. Christopher Shaw's attorney says that a Beaumont police officer flipped him into the air and then body slammed him head first on a concrete floor. We are joined by Christopher Shaw's attorney, Chance Lynch. Mr. Lynch, how did Christopher end up in this situation?
Well, first, good evening to you, and thank you for having me on and taking an interest in this matter. It is extremely sad. Christopher Shaw is 41 years old, and last June, at that point when he was found in the road needing medical attention, the Beaumont police officer, James Gillen, arrived, and upon his arrival, arrested Mr. Shaw for public intoxication. Mr. Shaw was able to identify himself, speak and say who he was and where he was from, and he was still placed in arrest with his hands behind his back, handcuffed behind his back and placed into the patrol car. Once he was arrested, he was taken to Baptist Hospital, and there they completed a very brief evaluation to see if he was cleared to be able to be booked inside of the Jefferson County Jail. Subsequently, they cleared him. He arrived at the Jefferson County Jail, and once he was taken inside the bookend area by Officer Gillen, the surveillance video inside that bookend area showed where Mr. Shaw was placed against a half-glass wall with officer and deputies from the Jefferson County Jail on each side of him and in front of him, while the arresting officer, James Gillen, walked about. There was apparently exchange of words, and you can see on the video where the officer threw what he was holding to the side, and he snatched Mr. Shaw out of the care, custody, and control of those deputies. He placed him in, it appeared to be almost like a chokehold, and flipped him over in the air, causing him to land on his head. When we saw that video, we thought that Mr. Shaw had died. His body went limp, and he stayed there in that position. And we saw blood coming from his head due to a laceration with him hitting his head on that concrete floor. Officer Gillen also fell on top of him. So Mr. Shaw was about half his size, flipped over in the air again with his hands cuffed behind his back, unable to control the fall or to break the fall or even brace himself. And the officer fell on top of him, causing a laceration on his head. He stayed unconscious for a number of seconds or minutes. They called the ambulance. They took him back to Baptist Hospital, and the officer who assaulted him, or the officer who flipped him over, should I say, let me correct myself, the officer who flipped him over, that's the best terminology to use. He was the one who was his spokesperson for the medical provision that he needed and the medical treatment. He spoke on behalf of Mr. Shaw. After a very brief evaluation from the medical staff there, he was released to go back to Jefferson County Jail. When he arrived back at Jefferson County Jail, on the surveillance video, you'll see that Mr. Shaw is accompanied by the arresting officer and an assisting officer. One of those officers is shown literally holding up Mr. Shaw's legs because Mr. Shaw was not able to control his extremities. He was holding up his legs so his legs would not drag the ground. Once he got inside the bookend area, you'll see that Mr. Shaw was sitting in a bizarre fashion, abnormal to any person who was sitting in a wheelchair, unable to lift his head and control his extremities even the more. In fact, staff from the Jefferson County Jail had to hold up his body so that they could change him out into prison and jail attire. He was placed into a cell where he subsequently ended up on the floor, and he repeatedly asked for medical attention while the staff in the jail and Core Health, one of the nurses, looked at him and simply said, "I'm not going to help you until you help yourself." His breathing became labored and he almost died. Mr. Shaw states that his breathing became labored and he told the nurse on staff who refused to help him that he was going to die on her watch. Here's the thing. Mr. Shaw laid there on that floor, unable to move for more than 18 and 19 hours in his own feces and his own urine. And finally, the ambulance was called. He was taken to St. Christopher's Hospital, where they did an evaluation and discovered that Mr. Shaw's spine had been severed in several places, and he was paralyzed from the chest down. To date, he still cannot stand. He cannot walk. He's in need of consistent assistance. He cannot bathe and eat on his own. Mr. Shaw's life has been completely changed. A man who used to walk to work, who walked inside of the Jefferson County Jail, is now having to be wheeled around in a wheelchair.
The video that you referenced, has that been released?
It has not. We have asked for the release of that video. The sheriff, Zena Stevens, called in the Texas Rangers to investigate the behavior of that Beaumont police officer once she saw the video. The Texas Rangers completed their investigation, and our request was submitted to the Texas Attorney General's office. Their office has stated that the disclosure is not permissive because it would show the inside of that bookend area. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I have not looked at the sheriff's website, but I'm told by my co-counsel that the same bookend area that they are protecting, saying that it could possibly be a security risk, is the same bookend area that shows the pictures on the public website. So we are uncertain as to why they will not release this video. It does not show any particular exit that I would suggest that would cause a security threat to the jail or to the sheriff's office. However, they are still refusing to release this video to the public.
In one of the articles that I read, it said that officers say that Shaw was inside the booking area and he became aggressive, using physical force to push the officers, according to this probable cause affidavit, which led to him being body slammed. Can you explain more about the situation and how they can make that argument? He's handcuffed. Even if he were pushing other officers, he is still handcuffed. So kind of explain if they even have legal grounds to make that statement.
You know, I hate to use secular vernacular phrases, but make it make sense. You know, how does that make sense when he is arrested for public intoxication? There is an expectation that one, as a former assistant district attorney who has prosecuted these cases, and I served as a criminal defense attorney, there is a presumption that there will be aggressive behavior by one who is arrested for public intoxication. But the narrative does not change based off of just that affidavit. The facts remain the same. He was surrounded on each side, on his left side, his right side, and in front of him by deputy correctional officers of the Jefferson County Jail. This officer snatched him out of the care and control and custody of these deputies. This is what the surveillance video shows. What puzzles me is that I believe, and I'm not certain, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this, that there was an affidavit by the arresting officer who flipped him, causing the breaking in his neck and his spine. But why didn't they show the video? Why didn't they show the video to this grand jury for them to be able to see it themselves instead of taking only the sworn testimony of this police officer whose police chief has publicly said, Jimmy Singletary, that he stands by his man, that he's sad that Mr. Shaw is paralyzed and he cannot walk and the quality of his life has changed, but he stands by his guy and he believes that he was doing his job. Now, I don't understand how that is not excessive, and that's why we filed a federal lawsuit, because we believe that it was excessive force indeed for him to take this man whose hands were cuffed behind his back, who posed no imminent threat, harm, or danger, still surrounded by 3 officers, not including the voluminous amount of staff that was still in that area. But he was directly surrounded by 3 jail officers, and yet this officer thought that it was okay to snatch him out of their care and control and custody and flip him in the air, breaking his neck. I can't make it make sense. I've only seen the video. And for the police chief to make that statement, that's why we're saying release the video. And we'll be able to get it without subpoena power and the phase of discovery. But we still believe that the public should see what they did to Mr. Shaw.
And our producers have the website of this facility to kind of show this is the corrections facility being displayed on the screen right here. And this is one of the intake sections that you were referencing.
That is in fact the intake section that we saw. If you see where that counter is to the right, it has changed just maybe a tad bit. Maybe the counter has changed. But if I'm not mistaken, that is the exact wall to the left where you'll see that is half glass. It's a window that looks into like a holding area where Mr. Shaw's back was against the wall. That's what we saw on that surveillance video, that his back was against the wall and there were officers on each side of him and in front of him. And that's when the arresting officer, James Gillen, ripped him out of there, carrying control, and flipped him over in the air, and he landed on that floor.
Let's get a full screen of that hallway that we just saw there. So according to the police department, in this hallway, they cannot release the footage because of security concerns. But you have a picture, bright as day, of the hallway. What is the difference between having a photo and the video of the same thing you posted on your website?
I could not have said it any better. That is the exact argument, and that is exactly how we view their position. To us, it just doesn't make sense, and I can't make it make sense when we are literally watching and seeing right now the same area where Mr. Shaw was, but yet they won't release the video because they say it's a possible security breach.
My last question, and then I'm going to take it over to the panel. How is he doing mentally and emotionally? I can't imagine how he's feeling or what he's thinking or going through, but can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen or some of the things that he may have told you about how he's feeling?
I'm fortunate to have practiced law at this point for almost 14, 15 years, and Mr. Shaw is one of the nicest gentlemen that you'll ever want to meet. His humility is impressive. He is strong. He is still encouraging. He still holds his head up, and he has a lot of difficult days. As you can imagine, being a young man at 40 years old and your mobility being stripped from you. His daughter was pregnant when it happened. She has since given born to his grandbaby. He cannot actively play with his grandchild because of his condition, but yet he remains hopeful. He remains hopeful that justice will be found in this case, that we will do everything that we can for him so that this does not happen to anyone else. And he is hopeful that and prayerful that the ultimate physician will heal his body, that God will heal his body, and at some point one day he prays that he'll be able to walk again, and we join him in that prayer, hoping that one day he will. The reality is he still cannot, and it's caused by the behavior and the misbehavior of an officer who took an oath to protect and serve, but yet caused this damage to his body.
Let's bring our panel in. Let's start off with Xavier. What are your thoughts? I'm getting goosebumps just hearing this. Xavier, what are your thoughts?
Attorney Lynch, thank you for showing up and letting us know what's going on with the case and standing up for the rights of those that have been treated unfairly by the system. My question is, has it been a medical determination as to the 18 to 19 hours that he was left injured and what the impact would have been at some point from his initial injury when he was flipped on his head like it was some WWE match? And then secondly, what is the long-term implications in terms of how soon he can get to walking? Will he ever walk again? The prognosis, any physical therapy, the amount of time and hours it will take and money it will take to be able to potentially bring him back whole again?
I appreciate that, and thank you for your question. I'm going to have to curtail my answer, and I want to answer your question, but I do want to curtail my response because we do have federal litigation that's pending. And as you know, once litigation begins, I have to be very limited on what I say going forward. I will say that he has undergone a number of operations there at St. Christopher's, and he has not had the financial stability or ability to be able to have ongoing treatment for his physical therapy. As a result of that, and his inability to provide that, and a lack of coverage to be able to provide the adequate medical attention, you can imagine the impact it has had on his body. The nerve damage, the loss of body mass and muscle mass that he has lost. I cannot speak at this moment based on the opinion of his physicians, but I do anticipate that that will become a part of our pleadings and the discovery as we go forward. I can tell you, based off of the information that we received from Jefferson County Jail, that he stayed in that cell for approximately 18 plus hours. And Mr. Shaw, his recollection is impeccable to be able to explain his request that he made to the core health professionals who failed and refused to give him that proper treatment. That I can say that once the ambulance was called after the 18 plus hours, we're told that the ambulance driver who came inside to load his body up on the gurney and take him out, once they did a brief evaluation, they stated that his body was extremely swollen. Now, I'm not a physician. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a Jewish doctor. So that is not, that's not my wheelhouse. But common sense is very clear, even though it's not always common, that when you have an injury to your spine, the quicker you get medical attention to alleviate the possibility of swelling, gives a possibility of a quicker recovery. Mr. Shaw was not given that. Though he asked for medical attention, they failed to do it. And wherein he could have received adequate medical attention, they chose not to call the ambulance to get him to the hospital based on his request. And he stayed there swelling and swelling until 18 plus hours later, they were called in and he was taken into surgery.
Kelly, what are your thoughts, or do you have any questions?
My thoughts are all over the place just because this is absolutely yet another tragedy. My heart goes out to him and his family, my prayers as well. But my question to you is, as a community, given that this man has lost his livelihood, what has been done and what can be done as outside of legal things and lawsuits and the like? But has there been a GoFundMe? Has there been any source of income that this man can rely on in order to have some semblance of a livelihood?
I appreciate that question, and I'm grateful for activists like Dr. William Barber with the Poor People's Campaign and Repairers of the Breach, the local NAACP, Reverend Jesse Jackson, the Rainbow Push Coalition, their leadership and their activism in this matter. They have taken an interest in Mr. Shaw's matter, and just last week held a joint press conference with our legal team to bring awareness to the Beaumont community so that they are aware of what happened and the status of Mr. Shaw. Those activists have also privately, in their own way, reached out to Mr. Shaw to be able to provide some type of support other than those in his immediate family. Mr. Shaw and our team are in discussions now of the possibility of establishing a GoFundMe to be able to meet his daily needs. He cannot work. And going forward, we anticipate that he will need a caretaker around the clock. One of the things that Mr. Shaw has stated is that even with his difficulty in eating, he needs assistance to be able to fix his food and to actually feed himself. And so we can project that his needs going forward, he's still a young man, that he's going to have a number of needs, and any financial support is going to be, completely appreciated and needed. Those in the community to join with the local NAACP. The local NAACP right now is led by Michael Cooper, a local pastor. Candace Matthews with the Rainbow Push Coalition, who governs that area for the Reverend Jesse Jackson. She's taken an interest in being able to help him as well. Dick Gregory and Voice for the People with Ricky Jason has taken an interest in Mr. Shaw. They've been helping him. I know that between Mr. Jason and Pastor Cooper, they've worked to get him a wheelchair, because the wheelchair that he had was just run down and insufficient. And again, the Poor People's Campaign and the Repairers of the Breach have started meeting weekly to have a weekly prayer meeting to bring awareness to that situation, so that the citizens in Beaumont will not just cause this to just be swept under the rug, but to really take an active role in holding that police chief, that police officer, and this police department accountable for what has happened to Mr. Shaw.
Michael, we haven't heard from you yet. What are your thoughts?
This is, once again, another crazy story. I had a question for Attorney Lynch. Thanks for coming on today. Has the Beaumont Police Department given any explanation of why Mr. Shaw laid in his cell for more than 18 hours, apparently bleeding, and he was in the cell to the point he has to go to the bathroom? They wouldn't let him go to the bathroom. He uses the bathroom on himself. Have they given any explanation of why he was in the cell that long and denied medical attention?
There has not been an explanation provided by the Jefferson County Jail. And I want to make sure that I'm clear. It was the Beaumont police officer, James Gillen, who flipped him over and caused him to have those injuries. But he was placed in the Jefferson County Jail.
Jefferson County Jail.
Of the elected sheriff. We have not received any correspondence from the sheriff's office to give us any explanation as to why he was there for 18 plus hours. As you know, we filed a federal lawsuit against Core Health, who was the medical provider that was contracted with the Jefferson County Jail to provide medical treatment to its inmates. That Core Health, that entity, had the nurses and the staff there who were required to attend to his needs, but yet refused to help Mr. Shaw and said, "I'm not going to help you until you help yourself." The sheriff and the sheriff's representative has not provided us an explanation as to why Mr. Shaw was left lying on that floor in his own feces and urine for 18 plus hours.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
Well, you know, Attorney Lynch, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And again, my prayers go out to your client and his family as well. I'm hoping that he will get that recovery that he's hoping for, so he will be able to walk again. But please keep us up to date on how this progresses, because I know our viewers will love to know, what goes further after our interview with you. So thank you so much for joining us.
All right, folks, back to our RolandMartinUnfiltered video in just one moment.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?